What they used to learn was a huge amount of information about anatomy, physiology and so on, but often not how to solve problems. And usually when a patient walks into the doctor's office, the first thing is to solve the problem. What's the problem? Why is he here? Why is she here? What's the illness? You have symptoms and you have to work back from that. And the reason they moved to problem-based learning is that and you have to remember they did a 4-year science degree before they went into the MD program, another 4 years in the MD program, so it's an 8-year degree basically, and they couldn't cram all the content into 8 years. We're having the same problems in engineering. You can't put all the curriculum into the time available, otherwise people will be learning all the time. Of course that's what they're going to have to do, but they're going to have to learn all the time outside the university, not just inside it. So the problem-based learning approach allows you to deal with large quantities of information. You know where that information is. For instance, no doctor now can know the interaction between all drugs. You have to look it up. You can't memorize it. It would be impossible to memorize all the possible permutations of drugs. So you have to know where to find that information. And lastly, knowledge construction. Now what that means is a group of people working together and finding a solution to a problem that nobody else has come up with. And this could be a group of undergraduate students as well as postgraduate students. And it's not necessarily a big academic issue they're trying to resolve. It could be something quite simple, like how to improve a car door lock, for instance, or how to bring in a safer way of securing a car. And this is a group of people working together to construct new ideas and new knowledge. Now the important thing here is that great, we can move to e-learning and it has some benefits and advantages in the knowledge-based economy, but what's the cost? And again, you have to go back to that graph of the different kinds of e-learning. So, and this graph is half conceptual and half data-based. In other words, for about five or six of these lines I've got real data and the others I'm guessing. So I won't tell you which ones I'm guessing, but well, I might do if you ask. Now if we think of the number of students in a course over 5 years, and again with technology-based teaching it's really important not to just look at the first year, because you spend more money in the first year creating the course but maybe less in delivering it. So you have to look over a 5-year period. Now 2,000 students in one course, well yes, we have at UBC 1,200 students in 1 year in some courses. In first year microbiology we have doctors, potential doctors, dentists, nurses, all in that one course. Over 5 years it could be 6,000 students going through this course. And people don't think of that in those terms, but even with a class of 200, which is not unusual, you could end up with 1,000 students going through the same course in 5 years' time. Now let's assume that the ideal instructor-student ratio is 1 to 30. We'll just pick that as a number. You don't want to go over that number because you start losing all those interactions and ways of working that people need in a knowledge-based economy. So let's assume we keep an instructor-student ratio of 1 to 30, and let's look at the cost per student. Well, for face-to-face teaching, if you keep, and this doesn't happen, but if you were to hire a new research professor for every 30 students in a class, then your cost per student would, per 30 students, as you increase students, would stay the same over 5 years, because every time you have another 30 students, you hire another instructor. It doesn't happen that way though, because as I said, what's been happening, we've been increasing class sizes. And so what we've had is not a constant quality, but a drop in quality as class size has gone up. And if we look at print-based distance education, and this is real data, I've got data to support this, you have a higher initial cost in creating the course and a very much reduced cost as numbers increase, but that's because we don't keep to the 1 in 30 student tutor ratio in print-based distance education. What we do in print-based distance education, we often have a research professor create the course, that's why it's a high cost at the front, and then we hire contract instructors, and they often have more than 1 to 30 because all they're doing is marking. They're not actually interacting very much with the students. If we go though to fully online distance courses, we get a graph like this, and again this is real data. Not quite so much to set up the print-based course because you have more flexibility with the web-based course. You don't have to get all the information up at the beginning. you can add it on as you're going to some extent. But notice here there's two interesting things about this course. First of all, there's not a lot of difference between 20 to 200 students a year compared with face-to-face teaching, and actually it starts to drop as the numbers go up. But it doesn't drop completely to the same level of print because you're still interacting online. So, but you're not interacting as much as if you were there in a face-to-face class 3 times a week or in the labs and so on. So there are some economies of scale, but they're not the same as for print, but there's more interaction and higher quality. So for most distance organizations, it's not been a big decision. It's been an easy decision to move more to online than to print-based teaching. Now, let's look at the 80% of the use of the web, which is to supplement classroom teaching, and these are the costs. And why? Because, well, we've still got our 3 lectures a week, we've still got our face-to-face costs, but on top of that, the professor is preparing materials for the students, having to work extra to provide extra work for the students to supplement their face-to-face teaching. Now, often institutions don't see this as a cost, it's just the professor working harder. But it is a cost. It's a cost in 2 ways. If it's a research university, it means they're either giving up some of their research time or some of their family time in order to provide web-supported learning. And that's why I think in the long run, we will see more movement towards the mixed mode, where we reduce some of the face-to-face teaching time to allow the professor to compensate for the time creating the materials online. And we get a curve something like that. I don't know if you can see that, but so we should be able to design a mix of face-to-face and online courses that shouldn't be any more expensive than regular face-to-face teaching. And I've done that graph, and it's not perfect by any means, I realize that, but it does indicate that you can't just add on the technology to the regular face-to-face classes, or if you do, you're driving certain professors to a level of work which is not sustainable in the long run. And this is why e-learning requires universities to change. If we think that e-learning is important because it can help us prepare people for a knowledge-based society, but also that we're required to teach differently if we're not to overload the professors with e-learning, then we have to do some changes. And this leads to the question about the design of e-learning. And there are at least 4 different models for designing online learning. The first is what I call Lone Rangers. This is the poor professor who's doing it on top of everything else with no help whatsoever from the institution, or a pat on the back if they're lucky. The second is the boutique model, and I'll explain that more later. The third is collegial materials development, and the fourth is project management. Now, Lone Rangers, I picked that term from an old American movie originally, and then a TV series. The Lone Ranger, it works outside the system, basically. He's not a sheriff, but he goes in and cleans up problems with a gun because it's an American program.